Basics of hand stitching. At the end of this class, you will be able to thread a needle, tie a knot at the end of the thread, secure the beginning and end of the stitch. How to thread a needle. Let's first learn how to thread a needle by hand. The first step in any sewing project is threading a needle. To do this, you will require a needle, thread, and a pair of sharp scissors. To be precise in your work, you could also use a measuring tape to measure the length of thread to be taken. Here's how to do it. Step 1. Take a length of thread about 18 inches long. Step 2. Using sharp scissors, cut the thread on a slant or a 45-degree angle for easier threading. This will give it a sharp point and make it easy to pass through the needle eye. So always cut the thread. Never break it off because breaking the thread leaves fuzzy ends and may damage the thread. Broken threads with fuzzy tips do not go through the needle eye easily. Step 3. Grasp the needle between your thumb and forefinger in the left hand. Step 4. Hold the thread in the right hand. Step 5. Guide the thread to the needle hole. Step 6. Push the thread through the hole. Step 7. Once the thread is through the eye, pull it down to create a tail about 4 inches long. This end will remain unknotted. The other end will be knotted. You will learn to tie this knot as the class progresses. There is another and better way of threading a needle. Usually we push the thread into the needle eye. In this case, we will push the needle eye into the thread. This is how it is done. Step 1. Take the thread and approximately cut 18 inches of thread. You don't want to sew with too much thread, as it can easily get tangled and knotted. Clip the end of the thread sharply on an angle with a pair of sharp scissors. Step 2. Now take the thread and squeeze it tightly between the thumb and the index finger of your left hand. If it is too far out, you have no control over it. So bring it close down and have only a little bit of the thread showing. Step 3. Now with your right hand, take the needle and gently place the eye of the needle over the end of the thread. Now pull the thread through. You threaded the needle. Great! Now you've learnt 2 ways of threading a needle. That was easy, wasn't it? How to tie a knot. Now that you have threaded the needle, let's see how to tie a knot at the end of that thread. When a knot is tied to begin a line in stitching, it should be very small, secure, and neat. To do this, Step 1. Grasp the thread near the end. Hold the thread between your thumb and index finger. Step 2. Wrap one end of the thread around the tip of the forefinger in a loop, just at the base of your fingernail. Close your thumb over the loop. Allow about 1/4 inch lap over of the thread. Step 3. Keeping the thread taut, with the thumb and the forefinger, roll the loop together towards the end of the index finger and off the finger. Step 4. Just as it slides off, use your middle finger to step on the loop and hold while you pull the thread into a tight knot. Great! We have now tied a knot. Let's see it all in one go. As you just learnt, after you had threaded the needle, you must knot it at the bottom of the thread before you start sewing. Step 1. First, get the end of the thread. Step 2. Wrap it around the finger once. Step 3. Roll it off your finger. Step 4. Now using your middle finger, pull it back, and there's your knot. Actually, tying a knot is really easy, but you may need to practice a few times until you get the feel of it. Securing thread. Now let's learn how to secure the beginning and end of a hand stitch. Thread beginnings and ends should always be firmly secured and inconspicuous. This can be achieved in a number of ways. The beginning of the stitch. As you begin in a hand stitch, the thread beginning should be secured by one of these 3 methods. 1. By tying a knot. In the first insertion of the needle into the fabric, pull on the needle and thread until the knot touches the back side of the fabric. This firmly secures the beginning of the hand stitch. 2. Taking a couple of very small stitches in the same location. 3. Taking a stitch and locking it by looping the thread around the needle and pulling it secure. Let's see how to start with a loop. Step 1. Have the back, inside, wrong side of the fabric facing you. Thread your first stitch, but don't pull the loop through. Step 2. Then put the needle through the loop. Step 3. Now pull the thread needle end until it's tight. That creates a secure knot. The ending of the stitch. To end the stitching, threads are usually secured by taking a couple of very small stitches in the same location, taking a stitch and locking it by looping the thread around the needle. This technique is done by the following steps. Step 1. Take a very small stitch. Step 2. Insert the needle through the loop. Step 3. Pull securely and tighten. To conclude, knots and thread ends at the beginning or at the end of hand stitching are always within the seam allowance or hem allowance. With this we come to the end of this class. Let's just recall what we learnt here. The way of threading a needle, the way of tying a knot, the way to secure the beginning and end of the hand stitch. Take our next class to find out which hand stitches are we covering during this course.